Continuing the series where I talk about the political figures in Portugal, this time I'm going to talk about Assunção Cristas. Assunção Cristas is the current leader of the Popular Party, which is also known as the Christian Democrats. I waited a little bit to talk about Assunção Cristas because Portugal has faced a sort of political crisis in the past few days, although if you followed the Portuguese political context on a daily basis, you would understand that any political crisis is a manufactured one. There's not really a reason in terms of ideologies to have these political crises, because the parties themselves are not that different, even though they do all this theater in the media that they are, and that there's the right and there's the left, when it's all a lie. There is no right in Portugal. That does not exist. And the party that I'm going to talk about today is the only party, a very tiny one at that, but is the only party at the center. It's not right, it's not center right, it's center. Although when they have been in government, they have always applied socialism anyway. They are just like the Social Democrats, the center-left party that I talked about in the last video, specifically the leader, Rui Rio. They are center-left. And the Christian Democrats, or the Popular Party, they are center, although they, when in government, basically apply policies typically assigned to the center-left, meaning that it's moderate socialism. It's not full-blown socialism as the Socialist Party does, or the far left that tries to apply communism, basically, but it's a moderate version of socialism. Anyway, to talk about Assunção Cristas, I have to talk a little bit about the history of this party. A few years ago, the Popular Party, which was, again, the Christian Democrats, they had a leader called Manuel Montero. And this man was a very refreshing politician. First of all, he didn't seem like a normal politician. He spoke his mind. Whatever he said, he would usually do, which is completely against, not the majority, I would say all politicians in Portugal. They say something and then they do the opposite or something completely different. Manuel Montero was a bit different, and he aligned himself with what we would consider more right-leaning policies, which again was refreshing because Portugal has never seen that sort of thing. We never had a right-leaning government ever since we left the dictatorship in 1974. Manuel Montero, for example, he was against what we are now seeing as the European Union, which is the attempt by these globalization freaks to create a federal state, a huge state which is made up of all the European Union countries that have no borders, that have no sovereignty, and they are a federal state controlled by bureaucrats that are not elected by anyone. And Manuel Montero was against this quite a few years ago. So he was completely aware of where things were going, and now we are seeing this. He was clearly right. Anyway, he was also against the European Union to have the same currency. He was not in favor of that. Today, even though there are obvious benefits to us all in Europe from having the same currency, there were several problems, and especially for a small country like us with a very poor economy. We always had a poor economy ever since we joined the European Union. We lost some of our more important industries. We had a stronger agriculture sector. We had a much stronger fishing sector. But with the entrance of Portugal to the European Union, those sectors were pretty much destroyed, because the European Union literally paid for those sectors to be destroyed in Portugal. And our leaders, and I'm using air quotes, accepted that without question. And we lost two important sectors. They weren't huge, but they were important. Today, we basically only have the tourism as the most important sector. We do have some companies that do some large exports to the exterior, but we are mostly a country that imports stuff from other countries. We mostly have a deficit in our exports and imports. We usually import more than we export. So the currency being what it was when we first got the euro affected us a lot, because things got extremely more expensive. We are talking about double the price just because of the switch. We had escudo, which was our currency at the time, and we switched to the euro, and certain things doubled the price just from the switch. So in an already poor and miserable country, this caused quite a few issues. And I'm sure you understand as well that the wages didn't increase in double with this change. But anyway, Manuel Montero was a very important figure in the Christian Democrats. He was the one that pushed for the change of name to Popular Party. He was on his way, supposedly, to be a more important figure. However, the election results were never that great, and eventually he resigned as the leader of the Popular Party to who became the leader of the Popular Party at the time, a guy named Portis. Portis is a career politician, and he is exactly the same as any other politician in Portugal. He is saying something, he will do the exact opposite of that. He is fairly well spoken. He tries to convey his points as clearly as possible, although again, he will say something and do the opposite. So he is a Portuguese politician. He will do what is important for him or for his party. He doesn't care about the future of the country. He just cares about what needs to be done to maintain the interests of the parties, and specifically his own party. Manuel Montero actually left the Popular Party a few years later because he was in disagreement with Portis, which was not a shock. Because again, Manuel Montero was a seemingly truthful politician. He seemingly was actively saying something and was going to act on whatever he said. He was not going to change his position, and he had strong positions, like I said, against the federal Europe, against the use of the same currency throughout the European Union. Portis was obviously pro-European Union. He doesn't care if it's a federal state or not. He just wants the money that comes from the European Union, because Portugal is completely dependent on the exterior. So they had a disagreement, and Manuel Montero left the Popular Party and he formed his own party. But he never got relevant results in the elections, and he resigned from that party as well. And as far as I know, he's not in politics in the present time. Portis was a prominent figure in the sense that he was in government a couple of times. He was the Minister of Defense in Durão Barroso's government in 2003 to 2004. I believe that was the period. He was also the Vice Prime Minister in the 2011 and 2015 government, the one that had to apply the financial adjustment period, the Troika financial adjustment period in Portugal after the socialist bankruptcy in 2011. Portis actually nearly caused the 2011 and 2015 government to resign, because he was not in agreement with some policies that were being followed, even though they were part of the financial adjustment program, and Passos Coelho had to intervene in his supposed resignation, which he said he would not go back on his resignation, but he did. Passos Coelho actually convinced him, or we don't really know what happened. Passos Coelho is actually writing a book, and supposedly he will talk about these issues, and perhaps we'll know what really happened at that time, because Portis said that his resignation was final. He was not going back, but as I mentioned before, what he says and what he does are two entirely different things. Anyway, the relationship with the Social Democrats and the Popular Party, or the Christian Democrats, with their leader Paul Portis, was always not amazing, but they actually did the job that was needed, although not necessarily in the best way, but they did the job that was needed, which was to get Portugal out of bankruptcy. And in 2015, they ran as a coalition to the elections for government again, so the Social Democrats and the Popular Party, and they actually won, which was a surprise, but again, the coup performed by António Costa made sure that they were not part of the government. António Costa united with the far left, something that no one could predict, because again, they are extremely different parties. They have very differing opinions on pretty much everything. The only thing joining them is the fact that they are from the left. The rest, in terms of policies that they want to apply, are very, very different. But they made this coalition, which has been the bane of Portuguese people in the last 4 years, where they claim that they have ended austerity while performing the biggest austerity that this country has ever seen. And the coalition between the Social Democrats and the Popular Party disbanded because they were not in government anymore. And this is when Assunção Cristas, which had been a Minister of Agriculture in the 2011 and 2015 government, rose to the position of leader of the Popular Party, because Paul Portis decided if he was not going to be part of the government, then he had nothing to do in the Popular Party, basically. So he left as leader. I'm not sure he left as a member of the party, but he left as the leader, and that made Assunção Cristas, which has, or was, having an extension in the party since she was the Minister of Agriculture, and so she was basically the number 2. And when Portis left, she became the leader. As leader, Assunção Cristas is a strong person. At least she seems to show that strength, because in the past 3.5 years, ever since the 2015 elections, she has been basically the only opposition to the socialist government. Passos Coelho, while he was still the leader of the Social Democrats, he was also an opposing force to the government. And in fact, since they won the elections, they had the majority of the deputies in terms of parties. I mean, they had the biggest party in parliament, and so they were also the biggest opposition that the government could have. And with Passos Coelho there, the government did have that opposition.